We break the silence, we open the door. Love and compassion, that's what we're here for. With every story, with every breath, we find connection in life.
Welcome to the Little Hospice Podcast, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Roxy.
And I'm Kev.
Hello, Kev. And today, on our chair from a remote, faraway place, is Kate from the Coffin Club. Hi, Kate.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome.
You're very welcome.
Where are you in the world?
I'm right here now.
Where are you in the world?
So I am in Hastings in East Sussex on the south coast.
So a bit more sunshine than we've got.
And no, actually, it's grey and cold here today. I've got my big woolly pulley on.
Proper autumnal. So, Kate, do you want to tell us a little bit about the Coffin Club and how it originated?
Yes. So the Coffin Club is a funeral education forum. It started as a physical club in Hastings where we basically ran a funeral planning course. So I think when most people think of funeral plans, they think of, putting money aside with one of the big providers to pay for your funeral. But ours was actually about being really creative and about learning all the choices available to you so that you weren't just channeled into having, a 20-minute, half-hour crematorium service. There is nothing wrong with a 20-minute, half-an-hour crematorium service, but it should be an informed choice. You should know that you don't have to have that you could separate the cremation or burial from the celebration of life and be in a village hall or a hotel or a lovely barn venue or even your back garden if you wanted to. So that's kind of what the ethos of Coffin Club is. And then when COVID came, obviously it was really difficult to run physical clubs. So we've sort of moved it more online with downloadable resources. So everything from how to register a death to how to keep a body at home to what is lasting power of attorney to forward planning. So everything and anything we will provide resources for.
So when you've swapped and you've gone online, have you found that there's been a bigger increase in, I'm going to say membership to the Coffin Club, but I'm not sure if that's something you do?
Well, we still have clubs around the country, but rather than running full funeral planning courses, they just do little pop-up events. So maybe one-off chats about, I don't know, cremation or what's aquamation or what have you put in place for when you die. And then that will sort of lead people to the online resources, which are essentially free. But we do ask if people are able that they give a donation because that's what keeps the wheels on the Coffin Club bus. So yeah, it's generally just a sort of deathy resource.
I like that.
Yeah, I like that. I like
Yeah.
deathy resource.
Well, if you can choose all these options for your wedding, why not about your funeral?
Exactly, absolutely. And that's our mission on this podcast, Kate, is basically to get people to have open conversations about death and dying. Obviously, for us at the hospice, usually people have had advanced conversations, but not always. And I think it's sort of them preconceptions about funeral planning and obviously how old-fashioned it is. Like, for example, I remember my granddad, he wanted a massive HGV lorry to carry his coffin, and everybody was mortified that he wanted that to happen.
Oh, it's brilliant.
It was, and it did happen, and it was amazing, but sort of the things people were saying to him, oh, you can't do that. You can't do that. No, it doesn't work like that.
Oh, it's disrespectful. Yeah, I mean, because we we work as funeral celebrants. So there's me and another Kate and Kate celebrants. And, we founded Coffin Club because of our experience as funeral celebrants, going and talking to families who felt upset that they didn't know what their person wanted. It upset them that they didn't know what sort of coffin they would want, what sort of music they would want, whether they would want any readings, because they'd just not had those conversations. So we set the club up so that we could get to people before a point of bereavement, when they could think creatively, they could ask difficult questions. Because obviously when you've just lost the person you possibly love most in the world, you're not really in a position to kind of go, oh, do you know what? I'm going to be really creative and I'm going to ask lots of questions. You're just going to be channeled because you haven't got it in you to do anything else. So that's why we started Coffin Club. And my mum died at the beginning of this year. She died in January, and I had all those conversations with her when she was dying, and it made such a huge difference to me and my siblings and the wider family to know that the send-off we gave her was exactly what she wanted. So, it's really important to have these conversations. And actually, they don't have to be, scary or upsetting. They can be quite funny. And, also, they're just informative. My mum, really into classical music, loves opera, is German. And, we're all pop and rock and modern music. I don't know my Mozart from my Beethoven. And my mum wanted an obscure German hymn and, an opera aria and then a Mozart concerto. I mean, there's no way we could have come up with music that she wanted because our tastes are completely different. So even on that level, it's just really important to have these conversations.
Yeah, definitely. Was that easy conversations to have with your mum? Was she quite open about talking about things that
Well, it was really funny because years ago, I tried to have these conversations with her. I said, look, Mum, I'm an advocate for having these conversations. And so, you should have this conversation with me because it's really important. And she said, well, I only know two things. And I said, what is that, Mum? And she said, I don't want to be cremated. I was like, okay. And I don't want to be buried. And I was like, right, okay. She was a retired nurse.
Okay.
So she said she wanted to leave her body to medical science.
Oh.
But then once she actually was terminally ill and in the very last kind of couple of months of her life, she said, I don't want to do that. And so then we had much more of a in-depth conversation. I, of course, had a checklist because you can get one from Coffin Club from the website that I went through with all the things that we needed to cover, including the more practical stuff like, what are your bank accounts? Have you got any stocks and shares? Have you got any other financial stuff that we need to know about and wrap up for you? What's your digital legacy? I mean, in my mum's case, she wasn't on any social media, but if you've got a Facebook or an Instagram account, do you want it to keep popping up everywhere after you're dead? So these things are really important to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had a conversation with my mum this morning, and I talk about this quite a lot. Whenever my mum says, I want this and I want that when she dies, I automatically shut her down. And I'd probably say it's only because of conversations that we're having now on the podcast that I am becoming a bit more laid back about it and a bit happier to have them conversations and sort of inviting them.
Yeah.
And
I always say it's much healthier if you can just lean into it.
Yeah.
Just, everybody says to their mum or dad when they say, oh, exactly like your mum, I want this coffin or I want to be at that crematorium. And people go, oh, mum, you're not going to die, or, oh, I don't want to talk about that now, or, oh, you're going to go on forever. Well, spoiler alert.
What I find strange is as we get older, we always think about we need to do our will, we need to make financial provisions, but this is the same thing. So why aren't we normalizing the conversation about doing that plan at the same time we do our wills? Because we're thinking about death at that point. Why do the two have to be mutually exclusive? Why can't they be brought together?
Yeah.
I think death has become so removed from life in the UK. You would have had your dead person, in the front room. They would have died at home. Then we had the NHS, absolutely fantastic, but it took dying people out of the home. And, we also had from the old wise woman of the village who, birthed the babies and laid out the dead. We then had monetization of death with funeral directors.
Yeah.
And, excuse me, let me do that for you. Let us take that burden away from you. Well, actually, it doesn't have to be a burden. It can be a real labor of love. It can be something that's really meaningful and makes a difference to the people left behind, because that's the last thing they're going to do for their person.
Yeah.
So I think these conversations are so important. We train celebrants through another organization called Match and Dispatch. And, that's one of the things that we really want celebrants to be part of having those conversations and telling people what choices they can have. Because although there are some brilliant funeral directors, there are also, quite a few who are quite happy to just, oh, we've always done it this way and we'll just carry on doing it this way. Whereas actually, there are no rules. You can do whatever you like, as long as in the final instance, you dispose of the body correctly, which is cremation, burial at sea, or actually aquamation is now legal in this country, and no one's doing it.
Yes, I see the conversation.
As long as you do that, the way you celebrate a life, you can do any way you like.
Yeah.
I see the conversation is changing on aspects of burial, as well as the eco options as well.
Yes.
I was reading recently about I think it's a company in New York where they are breaking down the body more like a composting, and I think I could probably do that.
I'm obsessed with human composting. I really want it. If it came to this country, I would be the first to sign up. I just think it's brilliant. Well, we've got no space for burials. We're a small island.
Yeah.
Cremation is really not very eco-friendly at all. It, uses a lot of energy. Composting, you're just put in a pod and, you just break down, you're composted, and then you can be put back on the land like compost. You can be used in, flower pots to grow things.
Yeah, there's a lot of cultures out there that say you came from the land, so return to the land. And I think it's an act saying, it really is.
It is, absolutely. And God, I always remember 2 patients I had, and just while you're talking, Kate, it just reminds me that, so this is probably 10 years ago. So again, not very many people like talking quite openly about funerals, and both of them were terminal patients. And one of them, he made a massive thing about having a living wake, and he had sort of planned his funeral. He didn't want it to be a burden for his wife, and he said, I want a party and I want to enjoy the party. Why should everybody else enjoy a party about me and me not be there? And he did. He had a massive function. I remember some of the nurses on the ward being like, oh my God, it's a bit weird. But again, it's that historic practice, isn't it? Of no, that doesn't happen. You have a wake after, obviously, the funeral ceremony, and that's it. That's the way it has to happen. But who says it has to happen that way? And then I had another
for sure.
Yeah, and he loved it. He absolutely loved it. And he said for that night, he just felt like he wasn't talking about cancer. He was just having a party with his friends. And then I had another patient who went testing coffins out.
Excuse me.
And he went to lie in a coffin, and his wife came in to tell us when he came in for his treatment, and she was like, I was absolutely mortified. And honestly, he found it
Literally, I'm in
he climbed into a coffin. Yeah, he tested out his coffin because he said, if I'm going to be lying here, for the rest of eternity, well, I'm going to test to see if it's comfy.
Yeah,
and
you need that memory foam, don't you? You really do that. Feather pillows.
I have lain in so many coffins. It's not true. I think I've probably lain in more coffins than anyone. Yeah, I've currently got 3 in my garage and a shroud carrier.
If there's anything that comes out of this podcast for anybody listening, it's simply go and test out a coffin. That's your test.
Have a shroud because they're really lovely. And if you're being buried, they're much more ecological. If you're being cremated, people think cardboard coffins are really eco and shrouds, but actually for cremation, they're not as good because they are very ashy when they burn and they don't act as kindling for the body, whereas a coffin acts as kindling. If you think when you make a fire, you put kindling and then the log on top. So the coffin is the kindling, the body is the log. If it's a cardboard coffin, it just doesn't burn very well. And if it's a shroud, same thing. So keep your cardboard coffins and your shrouds for burial, people.
Okay. I feel like I need to take notes.
It's not quite the conversation I envisioned in my head, but it makes a lot of sense and it really does make you think. I'm a log. I'm a log. I want to be more than a log.
Yeah. Well, you might want to be. I want to be a sunflower.
I want to be log in a coffin with only
sunflowers. Same thing. Human ashes are incredibly bad for plants. You should not plant a plant in human
No,
ashes.
I didn't know that.
They've got no nutritional value at all, and they're very limey, so plants don't like them.
Oh my gosh.
You learn something new every day.
Yeah, so when you see those, plant a tree in human ashes, no, don't do that. It's a very bad idea.
Wow. Okay. So definitely not a sunflower then. Definitely not.
Maybe a nappy tree.
Sunflower. Are you going to be buried or are you going to be cremated?
I don't know. See, this is the thing, Kate. It's having that conversation. I'm terrible. I started crying on the phone when I was setting up my life insurance. I've got issues.
Well, I'm going to be buried, and I've already decided where I want my shroud from. I want it from lovely Lena at Shrouds and Ashes, who does these beautiful printed shrouds. So yeah, I'm ready. The other Kate, she wants to be cremated because she hates being cold.
Okay. Yeah, that's
and she certainly won't be cold when she's being cremated.
No,
for sure.
Not.
See, now, for me, it's not cremation. It's not burial in ground. I'd like a mausoleum just for me. Just for me. High up.
Okay.
Away from spiders, slugs, and all those things. It's the thought of me laying there and a spider right through your eye socket.
Yeah. See,
No,
that's
not for me.
That's what my mum says. She says, I don't want to be buried and sort of just lie there and be eaten by bugs.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of that.
Yeah.
But then I'd also like my remains to be something useful. But what could that be, Kate? Is there anything useful you can make out of remains?
When people say, I don't want to be buried because I don't like the thought of being, worm food. But do you like the thought of being burned? I mean, neither thing is actually an attractive proposition, is it?
No, I don't like the idea of burned. I've got that fear that I'm going to wake up and I'm being burnt. Don't know where that fear comes from.
You are. But if it's cremated, you could be made into, you can get your ashes in like one of those nice hourglass, timers.
Keepsakes for the family.
That's quite nice. You can also have your ashes pressed into jewellery, into diamonds. You can have them pressed into records like vinyl. So you can have them painted into paintings. There are lots of things you can do with your ashes now, which not so much if you've been buried. You've been buried, yeah.
What would you say about a bone lamp? Is that a bit too much?
A bone lamp.
Mm.
Well, I would love it, but I think the legality of you digging up a decomposed body to get the bones, I think there may be some legal issues around that, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Council won't allow that.
No, stop. I've got to ask you, Kate, what is the most flamboyant funeral then that you've seen?
Oh, yes.
So I did a funeral for Terry de Havilland, who's a really well-known shoe designer, and I know his wife is happy for me to talk about that. And if you Google him, I mean, he designed shoes for Amy Winehouse, the T-Rex, like the Stones going back. He was just incredible. So he had this amazing pop art painted coffin. We had his coffin in a seedy bar. Everybody got very drunk and very stoned. It was just great. I had another funeral that was in a posh hotel near Hastings that has a really long driveway. You know, it's like a country house hotel that has a really long driveway. So they had a New Orleans jazz band, and we all processed behind the hearse. After the celebration of life, we all processed behind the hearse down the big driveway with the jazz band to the main road. And then myself and immediate family only went to the crematorium to just do the committal bit. And then I went home. They went back to the hotel for a big party and cream tea. I mean, people always say, oh, what's like the wackiest or wildest funeral you've ever done? But actually, generally, they're not, because they still are what they are, which is, you know, a really sad and deeply meaningful rite of passage for the people left behind. So generally, they still are within, you know, the realms of normal, because people need that. They need to be able to pay their respects and, and have a meaningful experience, not just, you know.
Yeah.
So there's generally just a little sprinkling of something different. I had one funeral where it was, we walked around a field that was behind the guy's house, and there were posters with a different section of his life. So we would go to his childhood, then, you know, his young adult life, and round we would go. And we ended up back at the like community centre that was next to this field. And then his coffin was on the fork of a forklift truck, and he was lifted up. And we all raised a toast for him. Because he wanted to look down on everyone. And he was an atheist. So he was like, I'm not going to heaven. So the only way I can do it is to actually be lifted up on a forklift truck. So that was good.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's brilliant, actually.
Yeah.
That really has been meticulously thought out, hasn't it?
It has. Do you know what, Kate? Thank you for sharing those with us. They've been, do you know what? It's making me think of my funeral in a different light. It really is.
And again, a bit more of a
You can do absolutely anything. You know, there are no legal restrictions on how you celebrate a life. And, you know, there are very few legal restrictions. You can keep a body at home. You can transport it in your own vehicle. It just has to be covered up. But, you know, not even in a coffin. You can just have a sheet over it. You just don't want an arm or a leg sticking out the window.
Yeah, I can see that would cause a bit of trouble.
You know, you're not to cause a public offence. That's the rule that you're not to break. And I would suggest you always have the death certificate on you in case, you know, you're stopped by the police and they think you've done someone in. So, but really you're free to do whatever you like. We had one lady who she kept her husband at home after he died. It was a bank holiday weekend. It was May. It was quite sunny. She just had a fan, and he didn't really change at all physically. But you know that really varies on a individual basis, depending on what people died of, what drugs they were taking, whether they'd eaten anything in, the time coming up to their death. But yeah, you can certainly be facilitated to keep your dead at home. You can get a thing called a flex mort, which is like a cold bed. And you can use frozen peas around somebody's abdomen to keep everything cool.
Always got frozen peas in the freezer. Always.
And everyone has. Or broad beans. Doesn't have to be peas.
The bean of choice.
Anything frozen. And have you got any...
Basically.
Have you got any advice for us as healthcare professionals, Kate, in terms of having early conversations? Obviously, I know you said you've got lots of resources on your website, and some of them are really good.
I think the thing is to be really normal. I think what's happened is we've all adopted this, tilt your head on one side and use a slightly strange tone of voice when talking about it.
So creepy.
So true.
And I think that makes, because you're being a bit weird, it makes people a bit weird about talking. I think if you just, sensitively, but kind of head on say, it would be really good to have a conversation with you about, your plans going forward and, what you would like for when you are dying or after you die. I just think being normal just normalizes it. I think the whole sort of, the more weird you are around talking about it, the weirder it is. We do quite often talks with the WI or U3A. And, everybody's a little bit like, oh, God, they're going to talk about death. It's going to be really uncomfortable. There's going to be big emotions. We don't like that because we're British. And then because we're very lighthearted and we're very straightforward, within about 5 minutes, everybody's, completely on board and chatting and saying, oh, my friend's funeral, my husband's funeral, this happened. So I think it's giving people permission to be normal about it does make the whole thing much more normal. I think the whole jinxy, like, if you talk about death, you're going to die. If you talk about sex, you're going to get pregnant. It's really not going to happen.
That happens in my case. Jeez. I'm on my 4th child.
That's for a different podcast.
It is. Tune in next
I think you're doing more than talking about sex. Let's just say that.
Yeah, no, that's...
And on that note, thank you very much for your time today, Kate.
Thank you so much, Kate. That's been really...
it's really enlightening.
Good. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I love that humour that you've got connected to it. I think more people need to be more Kate. That's going to be my motto.
But we also need to talk more about it, don't we?
Definitely.
We really do. And not be afraid of the taboo subjects.
No, definitely not.
No, for sure. And I think just that thing, lean into it. Just, I think if you lean into the fact that we are all going to die, that it is part of life, it's not morbid. It's actually very liberating because you're like, yeah, I've got to live my life. I've got to really grab this thing by the, am I allowed to say by the balls. That's acceptable.
Well, we're asking our listeners to go out and try some coffins on, so, you've got to make sure they fit too.
Thank you so much for your time, Kate.
No, thank you, Kate.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Pull up a chair. It's time to talk. We'll meet you there. Bringing some light to the end of the day. The Little Hospice Podcast leading the way.